Hello, my name is Chris Somerville, and welcome to my thesis visual prototype, Studio One. I would like to begin with my thesis statement. And at any point during the presentation, you can go back and review with the audio off and read some of the notes. Excessive exposure to social media platforms is detrimental to normal social development, and if one is not aware of this negative impact, it can lead to antisocial behavior. To illustrate awareness of this negative social impact, an interactive installation will be created that will utilize live social media interaction and allegorical imagery to reveal both the nature of the participant's social self-awareness and the negative aspects of social media. Here is my prototype visualization and some key points before we begin. They are: research has shown that social media platforms such as Twitter can lead to introverted and distorted views of reality. Excessive online social media users display and are exposed to obsessive behavior, virtual bullying, online predatory behaviors, and addiction, to name some examples. In general, the dangers lie in the user's inability to maintain or distinguish between a realistic self-image and one generated in the virtual online world. The virtual world makes it extremely easy for the user to separate themselves from their online behavior when they feel so separated from or protected from any repercussion of their behavior and decisions. This ego-driven behavior, as first coined by psychological pioneer Carl Jung, is dangerous and leads to very self-oriented and socially destructive results. It's an imbalance of self-awareness and other awareness, a you versus me. An ego-driven psyche, as claimed by researchers, will make decisions for their own personal gain and not consider the impact of their decisions on others. This interactive installation will illustrate the destructive nature of excessive social media use and the detrimental impact it has on social behavior. For my prototype visualization, I have here represented in the lighter gray screen my screen for projection, and you'll see there will be graphically represented a sign-in to communicate with the installation via Twitter. An account will be set up so that the user can interact with the installation piece. Obviously, for anyone to participate in this, they will have to have some sort of mobile device with them, and that will be indicated on entry into the room. The black background is representative of the wall. So if the audience member decides to participate, they will click and they'll here represented in green is the user, and in the blue bars is the installation piece. There'll be several very kind of chit-chat conversations involved here, so that if there is any kind of pause, the interaction or the installation piece will kind of prompt the user to keep tweeting. The user can then input. And here what's very important is that there'll be a determined number of tweets from the user that will prompt the beginning of the game. This will most likely occur very quickly. So once the user has decided to initiate the game by tweeting with the installation piece, a very graphic metaphor will initiate the beginning of the game. We'll see that again. So very much like the startup of any kind of screen of any game, we see the kind of screen or canvas fill in with our tweets still in the foreground. And what this represents through my research is that in a visual metaphor for this kind of development between the kind of this detrimental use effect of social media on or excessive use of this on the user is that what it does is it hinders their kind of mental development. And this is not just meant for somebody who is young, but it happens at all ages. And what this does create, as I mentioned, is this kind of ego-centric mentality, which hinders development at any age. A good example of this, as Carl Jung, to use his analogy, is that coining the phrase midlife crisis. And that somebody who reaches a point in their life where they start thinking more about themselves because they've reached this crisis in their life, or this journey in this life. And this is what leads to this visual metaphor of this rowing, of this rower on this ocean, and that this visual metaphor of a journey. And this journey is what needs to take place for the user to recognize that excessive social media can and is detrimental to one's mental health. Other forms of visual metaphor that will be used and developed and will obviously have to be tested to create the right imagery for this, or visual metaphors, could be a game character. Here the game character is the rower, but another one could be a character who has to climb a hill, so that there's a start and an end to each one. And why this is important, that every time the user tweets with the installation piece, he progresses the journey of our character further. And what our character ultimately represents is our kind of developed self, or self in the real world. So as we continue tweeting, we can see our game plays nicely along, and we affect the progression of our rower through our tweets. But as you can see, that this area of the installation I like to call session 1, and with session 1 the conversation is fairly light and everyday chit-chat. After a continued number of tweets, what is initiated then is something I like to call session 2, which becomes more of a representation of our darker egocentric or detrimental side to social media. So I'll play that again so we can get an idea of what's happening. No, sorry, I'll just stop that. What we have on is session 2 scrolls on, and we see that it's represented by kind of just a vertical dark bar with a single eye. And with the single eye represents as session 2 is our kind of egocentric, or the virtual, or connection to the virtual world. Once again, we can choose to sign in or initiate with session 2. It will be set up so that you kind of have to initiate a conversation with session 2 or the I in order to continue the game. So as we say what's going on, every tweet we notice initiates kind of something is going to happen, or something is going to be completed. And in this case, I use the visual metaphor of the circle being filled, so that every time we tweet with the eye, it fills in a certain amount. And you can see here, rather than everyday chit-chat, here with session 2, the conversation becomes more personal, or even could be something that creates our kind of this misrepresentation of ourselves, because we kind of are separating ourselves, as mentioned earlier. And every time we tweet, the eye fills until it is completed here with a full circle, and that circle then interacts with session 1 by splashing into session 1 and becoming some sort of obstacle for our kind of id representation of ourselves in session 1. What this obstacle ultimately would do is hinders the goals of the progression of session 1 personae. And if we continue to Twitter with session 2, more obstacles will appear. So let me just play that again for everyone. And here I should mention that the continued kind of why this is filling in and why we see markers here indicating kind of a gathering of these kind of obstacles for session 1 is that it's almost like a subconscious checklist, or maybe perhaps a subconscious yearning for the player to perhaps see what happens if he fills more in or to continue to play. Ultimately what happens though is he can go back, and what we see here is or what we will see is that continued play with session 1 makes session 2 makes session 1 want you to kind of come back, and it'll keep saying keep tweeting, or kind of help me kind of messages, so that we can go back and tweet with session 1 at any time after initiation of session 2, so that there's this back forth decision making for the user to decide, what should I do? Should I continue playing with session 2 that is detrimental to session 1, or if I play with session 1, it kind of we start to ignore session 2 and it becomes detrimental to session 2. And this will play out until the destruction of either session 1 or session 2. So in summary, the decision to interact with session 1 or session 2 will reflect the current social development of the user. Interaction with session 1 will successfully complete the game, but will require an acknowledgement of the egocentric self and egocentric Twitter universe. The user's decision to focus interaction with session 2 will have repercussions in the destruction of session 1 and the metaphoric destruction of the balanced self. So what ultimately will happen is that the user will see that, or there'll be kind of a self-realization, or their decisions within this interactive piece will reflect their current social self. Thank you.